West and NATO is hoping some sort of stalemate in Ukraine, because it seems the end game for them would be stalemate in Ukraine, that Russia would suffer forever. Do you see that coming to Ukraine?
If you're a boxer and you're in the ring with Mike Tyson during his prime, I'm sure sometime around the third round, maybe a minute into the third round, as Tyson's picking you apart, punching you, you're sitting there saying, oh, I hope this round ends. I hope for a stalemate. I hope for some. No, you're going to get knocked out. You're in the ring with Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson's beating the crap out of you. He just spent 2 rounds studying, learning you. Now he's bringing the pain. Ukraine's in the ring with Mike Tyson, and they're feeling the pain. NATO's there symbolically. They're the trainer on the sideline watching their fighter get taken apart. Again, the trainer can sit there and say, well, the best I can hope for is that maybe Mike Tyson breaks his hand punching my guy, and then he can't finish the fight and we have a draw. That ain't going to happen. Mike Tyson's going to knock your boy out. Your boy's getting knocked out as you speak. There will be no draw. For all the people that are hoping for a draw, do you really think that's a draw? Do you think Russia's ever been willing to accept a draw? No. This war ends when Russia determines the war is over. And I'm telling you right now, increasingly the signs are this war will not end until Odessa is Russian, Mykolaiv is Russian, Dnipropetrovsk is Russian, Kharkov is Russian, maybe more if Ukraine wants to continue this insanity. Ukraine's going to lose easily 20% more of its territory and the population that resides there, because they're listening to their NATO trainer who told them to get back into the ring.
When it comes to the mercenaries, how much they have influenced this conflict in Ukraine? What was the outcome for the West?
Look, is there anything good coming out of it? Yeah, dead mercenaries. Dead mercenaries are always a good thing. I hate to be callous that way, but a mercenary is the scum of the earth. You're being paid to kill somebody not in support of your nation. Don't tell me about the cause. If it was about the cause, you'd volunteer. But you're taking money to go and kill Russians in this case. So you're the scum of the earth. You stand for nothing. You don't stand for America. Take the damn flag off your shoulder. Stop pretending that you're American. Burn your passport because you're the scum of the earth. You take money to kill people. Okay, you're a murderer. That's it. Just a murderous scum. So what good comes out of mercenaries going to Ukraine? That they die. That's what's good about it. And hopefully they die in large numbers, huge quantities. But, this isn't a cause like we saw with the Abraham Lincoln Brigade during the Spanish Civil War, where Americans went over to fight for a cause they believed in. What is the Ukrainian cause? If it's anti-Russian, then it's not a Ukrainian cause. That just means that you're prejudiced against Russians, and you just want to kill Russians, and you kill Russians wherever you could. Do you support Banderism? Are you a racist? Are you a Nazi? Well, then again, that goes in line with the kind of mental capacity that's required to be a mercenary. It means you're not a human being. You're scum. I hope you die soon. This isn't a cause. This isn't something to rally around. Did they have an impact? I think in the summer of 2022, they did have an impact. They stepped in at a time when the Ukrainian army had been eviscerated by the Russians. Everybody talks about the peace negotiations. Why do you think Ukraine went to the peace table so early on? Because the Russians were destroying their army, wiping them out. Yes, the Ukrainians were doing a flexible defense. Yes, Russian forces penetrated too deep sometimes without adequate security. Convoys were cut off and killed. But the Ukrainians were being wiped off the map. Talk to the Ukrainian soldiers about May, June, and the desperate straits they were in. It was only the injection of $48 billion of U.S. military aid and a couple $1 billion from the Europeans and the arrival of tens of thousands of mercenaries who were able to form units that were able to be deployed on the battlefield and used in support of this operation, this counteroffensive, along with other Ukrainian units. But the mercenaries took the lead in this counteroffensive. Now, they all died, and so did the Ukrainian army. That's why they had to rebuild them. But now it became positional warfare, and mercenaries started to realize that war is hell. It's not a lark. It's not a game. Getting hit by Russian artillery over and over and over again with no hope of surviving became something that fewer mercenaries wanted to participate in. And today, I think you see there's fewer mercenaries on the battlefield. They are deployed in areas where you have Ukrainian nationalist units, Azov Battalion, the Nazis, because they're like-minded. They're criminal elements. But fewer and fewer people are willing to go off and volunteer, sign up for what is, in all essence, a death sentence. But no, mercenaries haven't had a meaningful impact on this battlefield, except extending the conflict. And the only thing good about it, as I said before, is that for every mercenary that signs up, hopefully that's just one more dead mercenary. The world doesn't need mercenaries. The world doesn't need mercenaries. The world should condemn mercenaries. Nobody should weep over the death of a mercenary because they are people without a state. They have said, I am not. I mean, I get tired of saying a Brazilian mercenary. Really? A Brazilian mercenary? He's not a Brazilian. He's a mercenary. He's taking money to kill Russians. Is that the official policy of Brazil? Then send your own troops who took an oath to Brazil saying, we are defending Brazil's interests by going to Ukraine and fighting the Russians. But don't call them a Brazilian mercenary. They're stateless. They don't belong to Brazil anymore. They're the scum of the earth. Don't call them American mercenaries. They're stateless. They're not Americans. Americans take an oath to their country, wear the flag, get paid by the American taxpayer, support the Constitution. You don't go over there as an individual to get paid to wage war on behalf of a non-American entity like Ukraine, especially one that has embraced the ideology of Stepan Bandera. Mercenaries have no state. They're stateless scum. And when they die, nobody should shed a tear.
The other thing that Putin said during this interview was they have to denazify Ukraine. And denazification in the eyes of Putin was all about the law in the constitution of Ukraine. What's your take on this?
First of all, let's just start off. It's not in the eyes of Putin. Putin is a Russian president. He's the executive of the Russian nation. So say in the eyes of the Russian government, or you can even say in the eyes of the Russian people, the Russian nation. I think it's wrong to personify this and say that Putin is the one. He of course, was the mouthpiece. He was the voice that you heard. But when Putin speaks, he's not speaking as Putin. He's speaking as the leader of Russia, the Russian government, the Russian people. And if you understand that, then you understand how strongly your next words resonate, that it's about law. Russia is a nation of laws. This isn't about individual retribution. This isn't about personal revenge. This isn't about Vladimir Putin having a grudge against somebody. This is about the Russian nation, a nation whose history and heritage says that the existence of a Nazi regime in Ukraine is not only a historical affront, but it cannot be allowed to exist. It represents an existential question of survival, not just for Russia, but for the entire world. This is an evil that should have been stamped out in 1945, never to raise its head again. But here it is, fostered by the West. So there will be denazification. Morally, it has to happen. The ideology of Stepan Bandera can never again be allowed to resonate forth from Ukrainian soil. It may exist in diaspora, in Canada, here in the United States, as I've said over and over again. In Ellenville, they have a statue to this scum of the earth, Stepan Bandera and his compatriots. So his memory may live on. They're just like racism today lives on in the homes of the few Ku Klux Klan's members who hide amongst society. But we don't tolerate the racism here. We don't, I mean, it exists, but we don't officially tolerate it. Russia's not going to tolerate the continuation of this. Banderism must be eradicated legally. It must be made illegal. There must be changes in the Ukrainian constitution that ban this, that outlaw, just like the Germans did with Adolf Hitler. Outlaw statues, outlaw commemorations. How many Adolf Hitler Strasses do you see? Has Berlin turned their main street into Adolf Hitler Strasse? No. Why? It's illegal. In Nuremberg, have they resurrected a statue of Adolf Hitler where people come in and lay flowers every year to commemorate his death? No. Why? It's illegal. Why? Because the Germans have decided that Adolf Hitler's ideology, the Nazi ideology, is not tolerable. It's incompatible with Germany, and they've outlawed it. And that's the future of Ukraine. Ukraine will have to pass laws, will have to pass a constitution that says that Banderism is outlawed, not tolerated. And if the current makeup of Ukrainian government doesn't want to do that, then Russia will find one that will. And that's how you denazify. You terminate the current government that has breathed life into Banderist ideology, and you replace it with a government that will make the changes necessary to outlaw and condemn and eradicate Banderism. That's denazification. Plus, you hunt down and kill everybody in the right sector in Sloboda and the other neo-Nazi Azov who have committed these horrible crimes. Now, Russia won't kill them because Russia, of course, is a law-abiding nation, has done away with the death penalty. But they will arrest them. They will put them on trial, and if they're found guilty, they will pay the requisite penalty, probably 2+ decades in prison. But that's the lot of criminals. You break the law, you pay the price. I mean, as my old buddy Beretta said, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Putin said that in the eyes of the U.S. elites, China is the biggest enemy of the U.S. In your opinion, if that's the case, why they started this war with Russia in Ukraine? If China is the biggest enemy of the United States in the eyes of the US elites?
Well, first of all, Putin's 100% correct. And one of the U.S. elites who reflects the notion that China is the biggest threat is Tucker Carlson, who views China as a bigger threat than Russia. So Putin was simply calling Tucker Carlson out on, on his own ideology. The way the United States squares this problem is by saying that Russia is little more than a military power. That when you eliminate the Russian army and you stop focusing on Russian nuclear weapons, there is no Russia. From the standpoint of these American experts, it's, as they said, a gas station masquerading as a nation. Now, this is as ignorant as the day is long. This is why I always tell people, look, if you're a reporter, if you're somebody who follows geopolitics and economics, you belong at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June. It's the most important economic forum out there. It swamps Davos in terms of relevance. Davos is just a bunch of stupid rich people fantasizing about a world that doesn't exist. The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is about reality. It's where Russia is making linkage with the rest of the world, and that linkage is succeeding, including China, including India, including others. The other place you need to be this year is in Kazan in October, when Russia hosts the BRICS summit, and you're going to see a transformation of geopolitical reality. This is real, and Russia is a leader in both of these efforts. So I think the people who say that Russia is nothing, they don't know Russia, but Russia doesn't care. That's the beauty of it anymore. Russia's going to hold the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and with or without you. And the BRICS summit's going to happen with or without the West, and it's going to be a success regardless of what the West does. But the West dismisses Russia, and they focus on China because they focus on China's growing economic clout. The West doesn't talk about a military confrontation with China. They talk about this economic conflict, and they don't like to say that we're against China. We just want to de-risk ourselves. We don't want to be prisoner to Chinese-controlled supply chains, et cetera. But we don't have a counter strategy. One thing I point out about China is that they've had since, I think, around 2013, something called the Belts and Roads Initiative, where they've poured in $7 to $10 trillion, that's with a T, $1 trillion into global infrastructure development. The United States, in comparison, has no counterpart. And what we've tried to produce, we measure in terms of hundreds of billions of dollars. But it doesn't come close to what the Chinese have done. We are so far behind the power curve on this one, it's not funny. We can't catch up. So what we try to do, and we also recognize that if Russia and China make common cause economically, that we're sort of in a bind. So we're trying to drive a divide between Russia and China. And in some ways, you could see that Tucker Carlson was trying to do that as well, trying to promote to Putin the idea that China was a problem, something to be feared. And Putin countered that by saying, no, we don't buy into that. China's our neighbor. You don't get to pick your neighbors. So China's a reality that we have to live with and prosper with. And so we do that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to point out the differences between Russia and China. But what Russia and China have decided is to not allow those differences to serve as an entree for people who want to pry them apart. They're coming together largely because of the policies of the West. But the West, we were arrogant, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, to say that we were the world's sole remaining superpower, that there was no power capable of standing up to us militarily. So we just assumed military supremacy, and we viewed every other problem as being economic and economically related geopolitical problems. So we discounted the potential of somebody standing up militarily. Russia has surprised everybody by what's happened in the last 2 years. And it's causing the West to realize that this gas station disguised as a nation that has this very large and capable military, has to be considered. But one of the ways they're trying to focus on Russia right now is to drive a wedge between Russia and China. And Tucker Carlson was trying to do that, and you see everybody in the West is trying to do that today as well. But it's not going to work. BRICS. Spell it out, baby. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now we can add Egypt. We can add Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates. You know what's not in there? Europe or the United States. They're not part of BRICS. Maybe they will be in the future, but not now, because BRICS is the counter to the G7, to NATO, to an American unipolar world.
How do you see this war in Ukraine influencing the China's point of view on the geopolitical issues? Because they cut a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It worked out for them in terms of this conflict in the Black Sea. China before that was mostly focused on their economy. Right now, it seems that they're changing their attitude. Do you see these changing coming for China more and more?
Well, I do see China trying to capitalize on its economic strengths to become a more relevant player in terms of geopolitics, global geopolitics. What China's not going to do is replace the United States as a military hegemon. You're not going to see Chinese fleets sailing around the world threatening to bomb people. China's about economic development, about good relations, normalized relations within the framework of law. I see China stepping in more and more to play this role. It's a natural role for China to play. What they did with Saudi Arabia and Iran was very forward-looking, and not only in terms of the Middle East, but in terms of again, let's just look at the expanded BRICS. I think if we say that the world right now, the global economic engine is fueled by oil and gas, and it is. Let's look at the new BRICS. Russia, one of the largest oil producers in the world. Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, large oil producers. India, China, huge oil consumers. Brazil and South Africa, Ethiopia, developing nations that need access, to energy. This is a relationship that becomes it's self-contained, it's self-sustainable. It doesn't need the United States, it doesn't need Europe, and it's going to expand in that way too. You're going to attach people that consume energy, produce energy, and you have this symbiosis taking place. It's a beautiful thing to behold, especially if you're against American hegemony. You look at the American imperialists going, we don't like this because the world is developing and growing in a way that doesn't involve us. We're not in control. We're not profiting from this. And China is taking the lead in that. I think that's China's role. I don't think you can set an international table and not invite China. And look, that's what the United States has tried to do in the Pacific. If you look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership that failed, Donald Trump pulled out of it. It was all about setting an international table in the Pacific, but excluding China. It didn't work. China's now set a table that doesn't include the United States or Canada because they say, we don't want you. You're a disruptive force. I mean, the United States has become that mad uncle that you don't want coming to your table at Thanksgiving because he's going to come in here smelling of alcohol and he's going to swear at people and get sick and disrupt the whole meal. So it's like, no, we don't invite you anymore. We want a table full of people that want to enjoy each other's company. When the United States learns how to clean up and behave, maybe they'll invite us to the table. But until then, we're just going to be on the outside being that relative that everybody's ashamed of, because there's a lot to be ashamed of the United States today and how we behave on the global stage.
There is a moment in this interview, he's asking about BRICS and G7, who's in favor of BRICS, who's in favor of G7, and Putin comes to a conclusion that these are something like two parts of the human brain. Despite all of their differences, they have to work with each other to have a better future, to have a prosperous future. Do you see this coming to the US foreign policy? Is there any hope that they're changing their policy, considering cooperation and compromise?
No, there's no hope for the United States in the near future. We have a certain political and economic elite that are tied to the past. They don't want to divorce themselves from the past. In order to get to that point, you have to have people willing to cut ties with the past to say that we're no longer going to behave as if we are the global hegemon. We have to recognize, the new reality, and we have to adapt to this new reality. Right now, we don't have people that are capable of doing that, especially here in a presidential election cycle. Joe Biden can't say everything I've stood for my entire life is wrong. Therefore, trust me to lead us into this bold new future where America is no longer the dominant power. That we're going to have to sit down and treat people as equals. You remember, we live in an America that still is overwhelmingly imbued with the USA, chest thumping, we're number one attitude. And I'm proud to be an American. I love being an American. I wouldn't want to be anything else besides an American. But I've also traveled the world enough to know that we're not number one, especially think of the arrogance of that. I mean, you live in Brazil right now. Could you imagine if I came to Brazil and came off the airplane, every Brazilian I ran to, I went, USA, baby, number one, Brazil, quaint little country. Thank you very much. How are you little Brazilian people doing? The Brazilian people are going to go, you're an asshole, which is right. Well, that's how America relates with the world right now. We don't treat anybody with respect. When we get off the airplane, we're expecting everybody to bow before us and treat us as the Americans, the exceptional nation, the indispensable nation. But I would imagine that Brazilians can go to sleep at night, not losing too much sleep worrying about America. I think Brazil's a big country. They have their own problems. They have their own issues. And I don't think that the last thought for each Brazilian before the lights go out is, what does America think about us? I don't think Brazil really cares about America. I think the rest of the world is like that as well. Now, if America wants to interact with Brazil, maybe the Brazilians can go to bed at night saying, well, I wonder what the Americans want to talk about. I look forward to that conversation. But then they move on to the rest of America. The world doesn't gravitate around America. We're not the center of gravity around which we're not the sun around which everything rotates. We're part of the people that rotate around this center of gravity called humanity. We're one of humanity. And until we recognize that, our policies won't reflect anything. We're going to continue to be trapped in the policies of the past. We have to purge from existence, and I don't mean violently, I'm just talking about politically, everybody who's linked to past practices, because past practices are founded in arrogance, and America has to stop being arrogant. We have to start being pragmatic, realistic. We need to understand our proper role. It's not a diminished role. It doesn't mean that we're a small nation. We're a great nation, and we deserve a seat at the table. But we come to the table as equals, not as the superior power. We don't get to dictate outcomes. We have to negotiate and engage in dialogue to get consensus-driven outcomes. We don't have political leadership capable of doing that right now, and we don't have anybody on the horizon capable of doing that. It's going to be a decades-long process before America is able to fundamentally reshape its foreign policy.
Recently, Lavrov said that if we're going to get a new member for the UN Security Council, we support a representative from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Do you think that would be one of the steps that we can take toward this situation of having some sort of balance in the international relations?
Well, it's common sense. Of course it is. But, what it shows you is the comfort level of Russia and its role in the world today. Russia looks at the Security Council right now, the 5 permanent members, and they see the United States, Great Britain, France. Look at those 3 victors of the Second World War, but really only one's a great nation. France and Great Britain are just a joke, a joke. I mean, Great Britain, when you factor it into the list of nations, it's pathetic. It's at the bottom. France, same thing. These are not great nations. They're not even great civilizations anymore. France is holding on to some sort of claim, but there's nothing. The British Empire, a thing of the past. Great Britain, the Commonwealth, just a crumbling edifice of nothingness. Then you have Russia and China, and they're looking at each other going, we're doing okay. We're sort of confident in where we stand today. We got BRICS, we got the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russia's got great relations with Africa. They don't fear Africa. Russia is capable of having good relations with South America. They don't fear Venezuela. They don't fear Brazil. They don't fear. They're comfortable with these people as equals. That's the thing. And the Chinese, they're just basically saying the whole world is our oyster, economic oyster. We'll deal with everybody. Bring more to the table. We can handle this because we're China. We have an economy that's growing, booming. We're comfortable with this. The United States isn't comfortable because right now we can control the Security Council because we can control these 2 little pathetic puppies that are there, France and the United Kingdom. If you bring in another Security Council member that, there's talk of, Germany, why would you let Germany in? They were defeated World War II power, so they should never be given a seat at the table, just like Japan. But even if they did come in, it's a failing economy. Why not bring in a thriving economy, a growing economy? Again, South Africa, it's got a seat at the table in BRICS. Make South Africa a permanent Security Council member. That would be nice. In Asia, you can, there's a lot of candidates. India, they're a power. Let's bring India in. Brazil deserves a seat at the table. They're there. But see what I just gave you is I gave you 3 of the BRICS countries. It shows you that the United States is not in control of the growth of the world. It's not comfortable with a growing and empowered world, and the United States will not allow expansion of the Security Council in this manner. If they were going to agree to expansion, they would have to have a country they can control. The United States doesn't know how to coexist with people as equals. We have to control people. So we will not allow the expansion of the Security Council unless it includes Germany, or Japan. We can control these two countries. But God, no, we're never going to let Brazil in. We're never going to let India in. We're never going to let South Africa in because we're afraid of them. We're afraid of truly independent-minded nations.